Welcome to ShiftWatch. I'm your host, Starbuck. In this episode, Ani invited me to sit down with her for her channel, and we discuss the energetic state of things, comparing our current world with that of the end of Atlantis and Lemuria, realities of extraterrestrial experiences, and more. Next, understanding the measurable effects of the current solar impacts within the solar system. Ben Davidson at Space Weather News updates us on a new radiation belt that was detected by NASA after the May 2020 solar storm. More evidence of the Earth's weakening magnetic field. Then, have you ever wondered what the other you would be doing right now if parallel space exists? Although the concept of parallel space may seem like a scientific conjecture, recent research has confirmed that it is a real existence. And finally, it seems that much of academic science pooh-poohed the ideas behind metaphysics because, of course, so much of it relies on intuitive reasoning rather than 3D logic. But even these humans studying science are not immune to the energy shifts going on and giving clarity to consciousness. Here is an interview with Federico Faggin, a scientist and mathematician who went through his own rise in awareness. We're leaning on technology in a way that, to me, just speaks to the last time Atlantis got us to the same place.
I was just going to say that. I was like, do you think that this is a repeat? Because Atlantis was not able to fulfill whatever they were not able to complete their cycle because of the destruction that happened. So that is now brought back to this time so that this cycle can be complete. This karmic cycle can be completed. So it's literally coming back. What do you, I mean, you just kind of mentioned it, but what do you think about that?
Here's my parallels, Ani. The Atlanteans had their own perspective on what they thought their role was. And when this conflict with the Lemurians came along, it had to do with Lemurians from a metaphysical standpoint thought that everybody was on their own spiritual path and should be allowed to explore that, where the Atlanteans were a little more structured and they thought that those people should come under somebody else's sway. And here's where the conflict began. So during that period of time, they had figured out a way, whether it was crystal based or whatever it was, they had really harnessed atomic power. And when they decided to weaponize it, that's when things went sour. And the eventual war that was caused by it was the result of, Lemuria and Atlantis, those colonies sinking away. So let's bring you into the current situation. Here's how I see what's taking place and why more benevolent off-planet assistance is coming our way. Because for a long time, it was my understanding that any kind of extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial assistance here to humans was hands-off. We were meant to evolve on our own. However, when we understood atomic energy and started to develop it in the 30s, and then in the 40s, turned it into a weapon and dropped it on a place of the planet, we just demonstrated what our little carbon bodies here for 100 to 80 to 100 years were capable of doing to a cosmic asset. We were willing to drop bombs on it and didn't know what we were doing. That is the point at which I think that everything changed, and this cosmic assistance now was not so hands-off anymore. And the first waves that Dolores Cannon talks about that started to incarnate in the early 50s, man, I see myself as part of that effort.
Me too.
If we knew that we were going to affect change, we had to do it from a physical perspective. So we had to incarnate here and then somehow hope we woke up by the time it was going to be necessary.
We took a huge risk by coming in, though.
No doubt.
Process.
No doubt.
It's a big risk. And I'm seeing the younger, like my children, I'm wondering if, she talked about 3 waves, and I don't know when the third wave, third volunteer group came. I can't remember when they started incarnating. Do you know the date?
I don't.
Yeah.
I see it more generationally. Like the
Okay.
first waivers were those of us that were kind of in the early 30s, maybe even late 40s, because by then, intergalactic help was there. And
Yeah.
this overlaps with interactions that
Mhm.
UAPs and real beings from other planets had with our government.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
can,
Yep.
there's more information that's about to come out on what
Yeah.
the government really knew. So there's a whole nother level of disclosure that is about to take place. And
Yeah.
parts of this, I feel like I'm being pressed into service because I'm neutral on all this stuff.
Mhm.
But there are entities within the government now that I've begun to hear from people that because they've had the same energetic feeling inside themselves, never mind that they worked in government capacities, they have the same human curiosities that we're having now,
Mhm.
and no one's really answering them.
Right.
So I learned last summer that there were those from 3-letter agencies that were listening to podcasts with Dave Wallace and myself, and they're just kind of getting a bead on what our experiences were and how authentic we seem to be. Or these guys just telling a story, and no, 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 they got comfortable enough. Look, we know that after the last drone incident in New Jersey, they trotted out a bunch of people from government offices and from the Pentagon. They told us the same stuff we've been hearing forever, that, oh no, it's something else and it's nothing to be bothered by. But there are too many of us that know that that's not true,
Yeah.
have plenty of other evidence. So they know that they can't keep marching out somebody from the government when the time comes that they finally have to come clean. And
Yeah.
so they're going to find some people that do sound authentic and genuine. And those are going to be the faces you're going to see pushed out here very soon. And don't be surprised if you see my face in it.
Yeah.
Good morning, folks. Welcome, observers. Today we've got a big story coming out of the May 2024 solar storm. We'll see the largest radio cosmic jet ever seen. We'll peek in on weather in the Indian Ocean, and we're starting, as always, with the last 24 hours on our star. Quite a bit to discuss here. Coronal hole directly facing Earth, several solar flares erupting from the sunspot group on the north ahead of the coronal hole. One of those flares may have put out a CME towards the Earth just about 2 hours ago. We are waiting for SOHO coronagraphs to update. Meanwhile, there's still certainly a lot to watch for on our star. Continued flaring, filament releases, and the coronal hole solar wind enhancement. Let's take a look at that sunspot group. It is beginning to depart up north here, heading for the far side. That region has had several flare pops that were too impulsive to make CMEs, and as we wait for the coronagraphs to update today, showing whether or not there was a CME produced this morning, we're actually waiting for 2 updates. Folks, the GOES coronagraph is technically non-operational, but only technically. The new coronagraph that will take the lead when the SOHO satellite fails is now delivering near real-time data. We now have 2 excellent ways to track solar eruptions. Let's go next to weather, and we're looking at the Indian Ocean where 2 cyclones are heading into the central waters of the sea. Good news is both sisters are expected to swing southward and make no significant landfalls. Up next, massive cosmic jets. They are the north-south linear explosions of material from the central cores of galaxies, the galactic jets. Today, we report on the discovery of the largest radio filament jet that they've ever seen. They say it stretches more than 200,000 light-years long, more than double the diameter of the Milky Way galaxy. They say it must have emerged when the universe was billions of years younger. Now, lastly, on the article front, folks, it's been a decade that scientists have known that solar storm impacts of significant size can add a third Van Allen radiation belt around the planet. While it has happened before, they've never seen an event like this one, with a record-shattering duration of the proton belt within the third toroidal ring. Since we know that solar eruptions were not titanic in May of 2024, but somehow their Earth impacts were, we have to suggest that this is about the 20th line of evidence that Earth's weakening magnetic field made that solar storm much worse than it should have been.
Have you ever wondered what the other you would be doing right now if parallel space exists? Although the concept of parallel space may seem like a scientific conjecture, recent research has confirmed that it is a real existence. In this video, we will take you on an exploration journey to experience another version of yourself in a parallel space. It is hard to imagine that parallel space is so close to us, almost like the next room, but we cannot cross over. However, in the rigorous experiments of Juan et al., items such as GPS locators and cameras were successfully sent to a parallel space. Through the camera, they discovered a customs declaration, a pen, and their text in the parallel space. An experimenter communicated with the owner of the customs declaration, Max, and learned that Max is another version of himself living in a villa on a certain street. This discovery raises some interesting questions about identity and the nature of self. Another fascinating discovery was the experimenter projecting objects into parallel space was actually done by another himself in the parallel space. Once the object was projected into the parallel space, it became intelligent and spiritual, able to communicate with the experimenter and even flexibly evade attacks. In addition, everything in the parallel space has vitality and spirituality. Even natural things such as animals, plants, and stones can speak. The discovery provides evidence that animism exists in parallel dimensions. It is worth noting that animism also exists in our own universe, but it is usually not perceived by ordinary people. However, people with celestial eye, such as a friend of mine, can freely communicate with objects in nature such as animals, plants, and stones. One of the most fascinating discoveries about parallel space that the people and everything in our space correspond one-on-one with a parallel space. The two spaces look like twin brothers, and they are interrelated, affecting each other and synchronously changing, belonging to macroscopic quantum entanglement phenomena. Researchers believe that the people and things in the parallel space are more fundamental and real, while our space and ourselves are more like mirror images of the parallel space. People in the parallel space have superhuman abilities that are much stronger than ours. This is because the physical laws in the parallel space are fundamentally different from those in our space, and the physical laws in our space limit our ability to perform. Through these groundbreaking discoveries, we are beginning to uncover the mysterious veil and infinite possibilities of parallel space. Although the real you in the parallel space is still out of reach, they have always been closely related to us. As our understanding of parallel space deepens, we are also learning more about the potential applications of this knowledge. For example, the ability to project objects into a parallel space may have important implications for medicine and transportation. Imagine that we might be able to transport an injured patient or important materials to another location instantly through a parallel space. In addition, the concept of parallel space challenges our traditional understanding of reality and the universe. It suggests that we in our world may have multiple dimensions and different versions. This may have far-reaching implications for philosophy, theology, and redefining our position in the universe. However, although the existence of parallel space has been confirmed through scientific experiments, more research is needed to fully understand its characteristics and potential. For example, we still don't know how to enter parallel space and take a walk and go trip.
It took me 30 years to figure out that mathematics is created by consciousness, and therefore I cannot explain consciousness with mathematics. Many physicists think that there is emergent properties in the purely classical world. It cannot be. Emergentism requires quantumness.
Federico Faggin reached out to Mauro D'Ariano, and together they published a paper, and Federico wrote this book. If they are right, not only will they have an accurate theory of consciousness, they will also solve the mystery of the interpretation of quantum mechanics.
Quantum information is the representation of inner experience, and the collapse of the wave function is the representation of the free will. What more do you want?
Federico, can you tell us about a pivotal moment in your life, namely the experience you had at Lake Tahoe, do I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah.
During your Christmas holidays of 1990.
Yeah. I wasn't happy. And I had reached everything that the world says that if you do all this stuff, you should be happy. And I wasn't. I realized that I was faking being happy because I needed to, because I was running a company. I had to be enthusiastic and everything else, but I was dying inside. So what's going on? What's wrong with this picture? And so consciousness then was, became center stage in my life, understanding that this consciousness somehow was also connected with feeling, desperate inside. So what's going on? So I wanted to understand what consciousness is. So that's when, and I wanted to understand it for my own sake, for not to do something about it, not to monetize, not to make a new technology, because before it was all about, doing something, and now all of a sudden I turn my attention inside because of the suffering. And it was in this climate that I had this extraordinary experience of consciousness. Now I can go to this Tahoe night, in 1990 during the Christmas holidays. We had a home up in Tahoe, which is Lake Tahoe is a beautiful lake, 2,500 meters, and there are mountains and skiing is great. And so, one night I woke up midnight, I was thirsty, went to get a glass of water, and went back to bed and was just waiting for, go back to sleep, thinking nothing. And all of a sudden, out of the chest, just energy was coming out of my chest, but it was love. And it was love that was never felt before. It was love that was coming from me. How can love come from me? I mean, it was unthinkable that love could come from me. And it was 10,000 times more powerful than any love that I felt before. I mean, in fact, I never felt that love because it was unconditional love. Now I have a name for it. It was love, period. Yes, it was coming from me, but it was love. And it was light. It was a white light scintillating. It was, like sparkles, and it was coming out. And then it explodes and it's everywhere. But it's everywhere, but my consciousness is there too. So not only my consciousness is within me, but it's also outside of me. And all of a sudden I realize I am that. So I am the observer and the observer simultaneously. But I retain my point of view. I retain my identity. I was still the same kid of 5 years old or 3 years old kid that I was then, and that I am now. And so that identity, the only thing of me that remained was that point of view. And then I realized, oh my God, this stuff is the stuff of which everything is made. Everything comes from this stuff. And my body was hot, it was vibrating, the cells of my body were resonating with this thing. Of course, the emotion, the feelings was love, joy, and peace. Because this stuff felt like, that's me. I'm at home. This is me. So I'm finally home. This is this is home. Mm-hmm. But so it was all mixed up. So you could not separate this stuff. Love, joy, and peace. And then the mind was aligned, saying this is the stuff of everything is made. So I'm everything, but also the observer of everything. So I'm a point of view of one with which one knows itself. And now is the centerpiece of this new theory of consciousness that we may talk later about.
Yeah, beautiful.
I was a physicalist. I thought, basically, materialist because I study physics, and everybody knows that consciousness comes from matter, perhaps. We don't know how, but has to come from matter. What else can it come from? So, that was the mindset that I was. So all of a sudden, how can, no, this is before matter somehow, so this must be the beginning of it. So, that changed it, and that started me in a completely different, I went orthogonal in terms of my personal development and thinking while I was running synaptics, so that was fine, but I spent from that point on 30 to 40% of my time trying to understand what happened, and studying, doing meditation, figuring, anything that I could understand to understand what happened. But that picture actually is the end. Now I can explain, with this new theory of consciousness, I can explain exactly what happened and exactly why that is correct. Every single one of us is a field that is both the observer, the observed, and the actor.